before we are able to teach students how to create their own podcasts, we want to start our discussion off with creating some routines with podcasts in there. So I've taken this and I've kind of broken it down into two different types of learning, asynchronous and synchronous. Sometimes you can use these lessons one-on-one with or students can do them independently, or we can have a whole class listen. And some of the asynchronous lessons include independent listenings where students are just learning on their own. You can have a bell ringer activity where students are learning on their own as well, where they are listening on their own device in their own space and then answering questions. We could have a writing activity after a listening, so students are practicing those listening skills and then doing a writing activity with some questions, or maybe they're filling in the blanks to fill in the writing activity. On the other side, we have a synchronous lesson where students are doing this full class all together. And these can be the whole class listens where there's 3 listens. This is more focused on our ELD lesson library where the students are listening the first time through, the second time through, and the third time through. This could be done through debate. So you could have students practice the listening and then offer sides for debate. Or speaking after a listening activity where students are turning and talking, they're doing a think, pair, share, something to get them having a discussion. And then in the middle here, I put the asynchronous and synchronous lessons that can be a little bit of both or either or. So if you're here to build background knowledge with podcasts, maybe students can listen on their own once, and then as a whole class, you can listen again. So they're able to maybe watch some of the videos together or individually, or it can be done as a station rotation where maybe you listen whole class and then they go into a station and listen further. Now, as we think about these routines, these can be thrown into your classrooms in any different ways. So I went ahead and made a weekly example. This is totally just an example of different ways that you might be using this in your classroom. So and I'm speaking of my experience, how I use podcasts throughout my classroom. But like I said, I taught science and social studies for English learners. So on Mondays, you could do a building a background activity or an SEL activity where when students come into the classroom, they're doing a Listenwise activity and then they're doing a quick writing activity afterwards. The next part of the day, you could build a vocabulary lesson out. So maybe they're drawing and building a flip book or making something fun to practice those vocabulary words. And then your exit out of the classroom is practicing with those words. On Tuesday, it can be all about notes. And you have a bell ringer activity with building off the vocabulary from before. You have guided notes over the topic. And then at the end of class, they're doing one of those short Listenwise activities and answering the Google Classroom quiz. Wednesday could be all about stations. So you could start the class off with a think, pair, share. Then in a station rotation, they could have one listening activity as part of their literacy, or the one station could be listening. The next station could be answering the questions, talking, and so on. And then your exit ticket could be your question. Thursdays were always creative days in my classrooms, especially in science and social studies. We were always building and creating something. So one activity for a Creative Thursday could be watching a video and then having a debate over a Listenwise topic. My favorite lesson was the debate topics was step up, step down. So students could have their point of view. They could step up to the line, state their point of view, whether they agreed or disagreed, and step back. It gets all the students talking in the classroom. And then your exit could be writing your stance. Okay, where do you actually stand after hearing everyone's ideas? Friday is always show what you learned this week. At the beginning, you could have a Listenwise activity paired with speaking. And then through the middle of class could be an assessment of some sort of show what you learned that week. And Fridays, I always like to end class on gratitude statements. So students are really building community within their classroom. So this is just a prime example of what some different ways where you might be able to plug in a Listenwise podcast lesson throughout your week.